The Bible tells us in James 5:16 to confess our sins to one another. This important personal growth directive creates anxiety and resistance for most of us. If you've ever felt apprehensive about initiating a recovery group for pornography addiction in your church, what Matt shares is for you. Learn how to sidestep the confession trap, where vulnerability becomes catharsis rather than a pathway to growth. Discover strategies for establishing healthy, clinically aware, peer-facilitated groups that foster progress instead of stagnation. Let's see how creating the right type of group environment can lead others towards freedom from their addiction.
I think one of the best things a church can do is start a group for those who are seeking to recover from porn and sex addiction, a safe place for people to go and get support, move away from shame. But if we don't have a plan, these groups can be directionless, and even worse, they can become a part of a shame cycle that perpetuates the issue. This is when someone comes to the meeting to confess they're acting out to the group. The group encourages them and tries to build them up. But not having any traction or program, they act out again and return the following week to confess again. And this repeats over and over, week after week. I call this the confession trap. It's a way that Christians treat vulnerability and transparency as catharsis and absolution rather than a lifestyle. I go to meetings to confess, and in doing so, I feel relieved of the burden. I feel some of the guilt removed, and the group rallies around me and I feel seen, but it stays in the space. I don't become more transparent. I don't grow in emotional vulnerability with myself or others. The shame and the catharsis of acting out and confessing become tied together. And I've only gained a place to dump. If I'm not confessing, then I'm giving advice about my success. And then I feel embarrassed to share a relapse, and I lie by omission. And after a while, the group begins to go nowhere as participants get caught in the trap and shame of lying, and the group dies a slow, slow death, like an upside-down bicycle, spinning but going nowhere. Sounds pretty awesome, but there's a different way. So let me give you some pointers to help avoid the trap. First, choose a style intentionally and have a direction. There are lots of types of meetings that a church can host. Celebrate Recovery, Pure Desire, Samson Society, 12-step meetings like Sexaholics Anonymous or Sex Addicts Anonymous. Do your research and choose a model that aligns with the values of your church. Visit some meetings that use the model you're interested in to see it in action. I recommend meetings that have resources and scripts that provide structure to the meeting. This keeps it from devolving into confessionals. Christian-style groups may make sense for your meeting, but you might consider more secular meeting structures as well that could open the group up to non-believers. If you would like your group to be facilitated by a leader, consider paying a trained counselor with experience in this area to act as a host. If you want more of a peer-led feel, make sure that the group is seated with a few participants that have consistent sobriety and that are familiar or prepared to hold the direction of the meeting and the style that you've chosen. Remember, meetings are a part of an individual's larger recovery program, not the only part of their program, and not a place to just dump. Participants should be encouraged or required to have practices outside the meeting to support recovery, such as more than one meeting a week, meeting with a sponsor, meeting with a therapist that specializes in sex and porn and trauma, accountability software, and daily practices such as prayer, meditation, exercise, and reading. This kind of well-rounded program provides momentum between weekly gatherings and gives other venues to talk about sobriety. In some groups, participants that are constantly relapsing are asked to take time away from the group to evaluate their recovery program and consider higher levels of care like intensives, outpatient treatment, live-in intensives, or 30, 60, 90 days of inpatient care. This can keep the group focused on recovery rather than relapse. Healthy meetings talk about sobriety, but it is not the central focus of the meeting. Healthy meetings are places to practice vulnerability and authenticity and intimacy. They are not the only place in our lives where these things exist, but rather they help us bring them out more and more into our lives. Healthy meetings promote deep accountability. Shallow accountability means a yes or no answer to whether or not you acted out that week. Deep accountability means I'm accountable to myself for taking my struggles seriously. I do that by making time for the meeting every week, prioritizing it above other commitments. The very act of attending becomes a clock tower, ringing on the hour, reminding us of our need for peaceful awareness of our mind and body and spirit. Real accountability is admission of our need for support and fighting shame to show up again each time. Healthy meetings acknowledge that God is at work in our weakness, displaying His glory and advancing His kingdom through those that are thankfully aware of their need for Him. Healthy meetings acknowledge that God is at work in our weaknesses, displaying His glory and keeping us out of the cycle of shame that keeps men from moving forward.